So Simon Wardle, CEO of Gooddrop, thank you so much for joining me on the Vertical Farming Podcast.
All right, my pleasure. I'm really happy to be here.
So as of this recording, it's the day before Thanksgiving in the States. And so anyone who's in the States right now is probably scrambling to, this is their Friday.
Yeah.
So I think for you in the UK, it's different. What is it like to just watch your US counterparts just react and be in a frenzy over
Thanksgiving? Yeah. Well, we try not to think about it too much, I guess, Harry, because you are kind of celebrating your separation from us, as violent as it was.
That's true.
We try not to think of it too much, I guess.
That's funny. Yeah. Is there anything that you celebrate that would be along the lines? Because, when you think about the origins of it, and obviously there's a lot of, meaning people want to attach to it. But at the end of the day, what I focus on is actually stopping for a moment and just to give thanks and gratitude.
Yeah.
And sometimes even like as business owners, we're just trying to hit the next milestone. And then I do this myself where I'm just guilty of not, being too hard on myself with what I haven't accomplished without taking the time to look back at what I did, especially like over the past year.
Yeah, well, I guess here we stick to mainly the religious festivals, don't we? With the odd Halloween thrown in. But Harvest Festival used to be a thing when I was a kid, but I don't know if people still do that, frankly and honestly. I'm guilty of saying, which is kind of appropriate though, Harvest Festival, right?
Yeah, it's been interesting because my partner's into a lot of like the Celtic traditions and like the earth-based traditions. And you go back far enough and, some of them, they really celebrate the equinox, solstices, the true like, milestones
it's true
that everyone in the world is going through at the same time.
All agricultural based as well, I suppose, right?
Yeah, that's true. So where's home for you now?
I live in a town called Beverley, which is in the north of England, north of Hull. Still both towns that most people haven't heard of, I guess. Beverley's a small market town, kind of to the east of Leeds, which is further to the east of Manchester. And then I think they're a town that most people have heard of.
Yeah. You get a lot of tourists there?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. It's like a miniature York, I kind of say. Again, another town that most people have heard of. And it's quite close to York, really, 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
So that's home. Yeah.
When you start learning history and you start seeing all the places in the States that have new in front of them, you probably want to think about why they're called new.
I don't know if you've got a New Beverly, have you? You probably have
Beverly
somewhere,
Hills,
right?
Maybe that's about the closest.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
So you're born and raised there? You grew up there?
No, I was born and raised not far away in Leeds, about an hour's drive from here. But yeah, I arrived here some, 25, 26 years ago, raised our children here for the most part.
Let's wind the clock back a little bit because we'll get into how you ended up in the world of vertical farming and on this show.
Right.
But it sounds like you had an interest, or it looks like from the CV, you had a bit of an interest in design early on.
A bit, yeah. So with a partner set up an interior design business some 20 years ago. It's 20 years old now. Working for brands such as Harley Davidson, delivering their retail environment design across the globe. Actually, we've been pretty much across the globe, everywhere. And we continue to work for them and other, significant brands on the high street, Arc'teryx, for example, Mango, Lululemon are all clients that we've worked for and are working for. So 20 years ago, we set that business up. And then that has evolved to become not just an interior design business, but also an architectural practice as well, with offices in different parts of the world. And that's going quite nicely, really. So kind of a quantum leap from there to vertical farming, I suppose.
I'm curious. Yeah. Did you always have that design inkling? If I were to ask your parents, were you always sketching, designing as far back as you can remember?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Always had an artistic leading, shall we say.
Where were you drawing inspiration from back then?
Well, I guess I'm one of these people that's found my way through life working for different types of businesses. Earning a dollar really has been what it's been about, raising a family. And quite honestly, without any real direction, you find yourself doing the job that you find yourself doing, I think is often what happens to a lot of people. It's a rare thing that somebody says, I've studied this and I'm going to do it, right? Like you were saying earlier, there's very few people in vertical farming that can say they studied it at university. We kind of find ourselves doing things, don't we? And I think maybe a common story is those that have found themselves in a career they were unhappy with, they finally say, screw this, I'm going to go and do it for myself, right? And I'm one of those people, but I found myself in a place I didn't like being. And the only option really was to go out and go alone and start doing what you already know and see if you can make a success of it. And we did, myself and my business partner, one of my partners started that together 20 years ago. And we've kind of never looked back, really. It's been a great journey.
How has the design world evolved over the years? And are you seeing it changing now? It seems like
Oh,
every
everything's changing, right?
everything's changing. So I'm curious, being in an
Everyone's a
industry that
designer.
long, yeah,
Yeah.
or using
Sorry.
AI for design.
Exactly right. So everybody's suddenly become a designer. Not suddenly, it's been happening a long time, with the advent of 3D rendering and such like. You find people that if they can manipulate the software, they consider themselves designers because they make nice looking images.
Yeah,
The truth is that the images are rendering of some significant thought and planning if it's done properly right.
yeah,
And I guess we're seeing the same happening with AI. You can tell all your AI rooms to design your X, Y, and Z. And lo and behold, they come up with some, actually, quite often, some really significantly meaningful designs in amongst the detritus. There's a lot of nonsense
yeah,
around some things, but inside them is quite good things. So we find you've got to learn to use the tools that are available to you, right? You've got to learn to evolve with that's evolving around you and become experts in using everything that you've got at your disposal, I suppose.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like every industry, it feels now, is ripe for overhaul or innovation, or
Yeah,
maybe
for
even
sure.
some may not make it.
Yeah.
When you think about what people are studying in school, or kids are studying in school now, how do you think about, like, you mentioned raising a family, like, how do you think about giving students or your children direction in terms of, you could tell someone what to study earlier because you felt that they'd have a solid career, but nowadays it feels like everything's up in the air.
It is up in the air. It's quite scary, I think, isn't it, really? And I think when you ask a man of my age about trying to tell his children what you should do, I start sounding my age, right? And I think,
Yeah,
the way we tried to raise our kids was to have fun in life and listen and try and learn and do
yeah,
the best you can, really. We're not pushy people. We've not been about
yeah,
pushing them to try and do anything that we think they ought to do. They're both succeeding in life and are doing really well as it happens. So
yeah.
I'm quite happy.
I'm gonna make a guess, and let's see if I'm right here, but I'm thinking about design and maybe your experience with textiles. Could that have been the jump to cotton at all?
No, it
Indoors?
wasn't.
Okay.
No, really, honestly, it wasn't
Okay.
that simple. I can tell you how it happened, really.
Yeah.
And it's this thing about curiosity, I reckon. Part of the designer within me is all about being curious and asking questions and being wowed by things is how I've always been. And I guess getting into what we're doing now was very much one of those journeys of that. So we were brought together with a number of people for a project. And we came to this project as the architectural guys, right? We were going to design this mega vertical farm for the Middle East.
Okay.
It was all planned. We were being guided by an individual that brought a team of people together. And it was really exciting, right?
Sure.
But in amongst that, I kind of got wowed by the actual farm itself and
Yeah.
remembering all the things that I'd learned at school when I was a kid that I didn't really hold on to. It's like, oh my God, a seed. And a seed does what? And you
Yeah.
start seeing the journey and understanding and remembering things before, but there was just this overwhelming excitement about what we were trying to do. And it wasn't cotton related. It was all about the leafy greens and such like that the industry is really perfected now. But in amongst that, obviously, I was telling you a little bit earlier about the history of the design thing and working on the high street and working with retail clients. And it was remembering the conversations that retail are having all the time about their difficulties with supply chain, that especially with cotton, right? Especially around the cotton thing, and being able to manage the supply chain and being able to genuinely tell the world that they sourced a particular cotton for these garments that is entirely sustainable, is, being produced in fields that don't have any slave labor in them, many issues around the supply chain in cotton, that it seemed in a light bulb moment that we thought, well, doesn't vertical farming cure all that?
Yeah.
One of those, do you think it does? And you piece it all together and you think, well, it's got the potential to, right? There's something in it where done right and done correctly and it all coming together well, there are solutions in there that can solve a lot of problems that the retail supply chain have got. And then hallelujah, right? It's another example of another vertical farming solution that does all the other very positive things that vertical farming does, right? That we know about in terms of water use and land use and et cetera, all the good things that we know vertical farming can do. So that adds to the sustainability message from retail as well. So it enhances their objectives around sourcing sustainable cotton. And they use the word sustainable. It's more than sustainable, really, when we do it our way. And then you ask yourself, why hasn't anybody done this before then? And,
That would
that's
have
an
been
obvious
my next
question,
question. Yes.
right? And it seems that people have, right? And
Yeah.
you might question whether the right people have tried to do it. I have, without naming names, but there are certain companies that I'm aware of that have grown cotton in a vertical farming setting and told everybody it doesn't work. I don't think it's in their interest for it to work. And there's a status quo that certain companies don't want to shift, right?
Yeah.
And maybe, that's one example. There's an example of that I'm aware of, a major company that did that. They're not a retailer, it's in the supply chain. And it's the point of the supply chain where retailer find it difficult to break through. It's at the spinning mill. So the example I'm giving is a spinning mill that's tried before.
Okay.
And I'm aware of other university projects that have tried doing this, and they're looking at, growing under glass and, reducing the amount of water that's used, all really noble things to try and improve growing in field. But we're not. We're going for the total controlled environment setting, right? A true vertical farm. And we are finding that it works. But there's a feasibility issue around the product that we have to attend to make sure that we can sustain the business going forward. And it's this thing, Harry, of don't just grow it, do something with it, right? Convert it, make it into something else that adds value to the harvest, because the harvest is a really expensive one unless you do something to it.
Sure.
So with our connections and what we know within retail, we took the decision that it's only really going to work if we go with a vertically integrated business as well. So we go end to end and produce garments. So we're going all the way to producing garments.
Okay.
As a proof of concept, right?
Sure.
And we'll bring our own brand to market. We know how to do it. The big difference is, I guess, that yes, we're growing the cotton, or we're going to be growing cotton in a scale up soon. We're in containers at the minute. It's working really nicely. Got some beautiful photographs today before it came on of a new harvest that's just developed under LEDs and all of that. Superb. But then we're going to be spinning our own cotton. So it's going straight from the farm into an adjacent building, through a pipe, into the spinning mill. And we'll be producing cotton yarn. So we're not just growing the raw material, we're going to convert it. And with that, we're then going to a third-party supply chain to deliver product, working with dyeing companies, weaving companies, fabrication companies, designers, as a proof of concept. And we have good support from retail. Some big retailers are interested in what we're doing, and one in the UK in particular is supporting us heavily, shall we say.
Sure.
And then once we prove that concept, we'll look for our first scale up, which is hopefully with another retail brand, whoever they might be, right?
Yeah.
And work with them to take it to market, and then scale up even further with license agreements, etc., and build these things wherever they need to be. 50,000 square meter farms is what we're kind of thinking of.
Wow. That's
hopefully.
Amazing. Lots to unpack there. I'm curious, as you thought about this as an opportunity, you were starting to work in vertical farming. When you had that project with the architectural firm, did you know the vertical farming market at the time, or you were being introduced to it as you were working on this?
Being introduced to it, frankly. Yeah. I knew of it. I knew what it was, but I'm only going back 5 or 6 years now to this moment where it was, the jaw dropper. It was, oh my goodness, right? And it does all of this. Oh my, we got to get involved with that somehow,
And then a lot of the challenges that we've heard on this show are, making the unit economics work. And obviously the big expenditure is energy and just everything that's involved in running these facilities. So did you have some guidance, people you could speak to who had been through this process to understand what it was you were getting into?
We're actually just making some contacts now. There's a thing, isn't there, in the industry where I don't think we all quite know who friend and foe are yet, do we? Correct. Who are your colleagues? Who are your enemies? Who are your competition? But I've got to say, one of the big farming companies in the UK has reached out to say, hey, if you need any help, which I thought was really magnanimous of them to do that. And we're picking up on that. We're in a no compete situation anyway. So, there's nothing to win or lose on either side other than them sharing knowledge, which I thought was, very generous of them to do that. We haven't had that conversation yet. We're about to do it. So we'll see how that goes. But it's been difficult really who to pick the phone up to. But we were lucky really that we found a kind of a white label contractor, if you like, that builds and has built glass house and what have you for many, many years, decades. And they've evolved into the manufacture and installation and design of, total control environment packages as well. So we're working with people that have experience to design what we're going to be building ourselves. So we're okay, I think. But it's having that second opinion is what I would like more of, to be honest with you. And that's the conversation that we're just starting with the other guys in the UK.
And you couldn't have picked a better time than 2020 to start a new business.
Right. That didn't work out too well. And
how challenging was that?
It was like a long distance romance, really. The guys that were first doing the science for us and with us were in Eindhoven, and they planted some seeds. We saw it grow, electronically, and it was, oh my goodness. The problem we had really was raising finance. We had an idea, and an idea doesn't really do much unless it starts getting some, blood in the veins kind of thing, financial blood in the veins. And also talking about an idea doesn't cut it, does it? You've got to prove that you mean it and put your own hand in your own pocket and get this thing going, which is what we ended up doing. So the guys in Eindhoven had a much more lucrative offer from an enormous corporation, and they've built an enormous farm dedicated to, or it was dedicated to, tomatoes and cucumber growing, that kind of thing. And it's beautiful, mind blowing. And they had to go their own way. So we ended up on our own without any science. That was the difficult thing. Yeah. But we resolved that, 2.5 years ago with building a relationship with the University of Nottingham that have got a fantastic plant science department, amazing farms, in fact.
Sure.
We supplied them with our test labs, which are containers, 3 growing rooms, busy beavering away with our lab and using some of their own resources as well. So we can have a few experiments rolling along together. We're getting some excellent data, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there wasn't a lot of people doing this already because, when you look at the history of like what's happened with greenhouses and leafy greens, there's decades of experience and research that's gone into this.
Right.
I can't imagine there's anything equivalent for growing cotton indoors besides the examples you just mentioned. So, where do you go for that information and how do you source that in a way where, it's the key ingredient, right? You need to figure this out if you are going to make a business out of this.
Yeah. Well, that's what's been happening with the university, really, that, you start with looking at the available data for in-field growing, so that you've got to start there, right?
Yeah.
And start evaluating, what goes on in-field. So we started under glass, growing under glass. We saw, density trials and what have you, seen how the plants like to be. So you start with the data from the field, basically. You plant in furrows like the field, and then we tried changing combinations of setup and what have you, and seeing quite significant differences in the results, to be fair. And then doing it under LED lights with, trying at different ends of the spectrum, see what the results are there. But obviously when you bring the scientists to the table, that they've already got expectations, right? They understand, they think they know what's going to happen. And we go ahead and try and validate that, right? And so far, so good. And we've destroyed a few plants at the same time, right? Just because you can, but you've got to do, right?
I'm always curious about like thought process or the way leaders think when making big decisions like this. So coming into this new space and taking on the leadership role, how do you think about building a team, for something that you're moving into that's new for you? And I'm always curious, how you think about like who the first hires should be, in what direction to build a team. And obviously a lot of it depends on what's coming in from a finance perspective.
Absolutely.
But I'm just curious what your thoughts are in those early years.
Well, I guess maybe we're a little bit different from others that you've spoken to, in that we have this vertical solution to the product as well to consider, right? So there's expertise at many milestones that, I have an overall understanding of these things. I have lots of curiosity about these things, but true expertise in the relevant areas, we need to go and get that, right? So it's about staging that. It's about understanding the timeline ahead of you and when start your search for key individuals that are going to, fill the key roles as the business develops. But there's very much, you've got to do it carefully, right? To begin with, we can't just go employing lots and lots of people in the hope that this is going to work out. We've got to find a way to make it work with our own energy and resources, which is kind of what we're doing at the moment, right? So, we've employed the university. We have a team of people at the uni providing the information around the sciences. We're outsourcing expertise in terms of helping us design and deliver the pilot farm that we're going to be producing in the coming year. And then there are key people in the directorship of the business that have different skill sets as well. One of the guys is very much in property and understands what it takes to negotiate a property deal, shall we say. Brand guys, my partner Andres is very, very strong in developing brands and that kind of work as well. So, we've got that covered. So it's having a foundation of the basics to get yourself going, but always having an eye on the future and knowing that you need to get people better than yourself to fill those key roles as you start developing. My job's to find them people, really,
It feels like you have additional challenges because normally, you have people that are running farms, they're coming at it maybe from a farming background, so they think like a farmer.
Right.
Or if they're in the leadership position, they hire a good farmer and they have to, figure out the other moving parts of the team to make sure that everything gets out on time. You're producing a crop sustainably and consistently. But now, even if you have success on those two metrics, because you're creating a closed loop environment here where you're now taking the cotton and you're now creating and manufacturing goods for sale, that's another hat you have to wear because it's essentially like a manufacturer as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I wonder how you like manage to kind of shift between the different responsibilities that you have. And is it just a function of finding the key people in those roles and letting them run with it?
To some extent, yeah. I think, well, very much so, yeah. When you find the key people that are real experts, of course you let them run with it, yeah. Why were you going to hold them back? But I think that there's the unexplored pieces that are in that supply chain, the things that haven't been done before, right? People have grown cotton before. People have spun cotton before. But I don't think I might be wrong actually, but I haven't found an example yet where they're literally one feeding the other. There's no ginning the cotton to be done. There's no baling of the cotton to be done. It's just moving the lint from one room to another room is all we've got to do, right? The miles traveled of a t-shirt, from 40,000 miles to 400 miles if we sell them in London, right? With our network that we're setting up. Colossal change in that. So actually making that transition from the harvest, Mr. Gin, we don't think we need that, but we need a version of it. We need to get the seeds out, right? But the cleaning the cotton, it's very clean with the tests we've been doing. There's not a lot of trash, as they call it, in the cotton that needs cleaning out. Yes, there's some cleaning to be done, but not as heavily as the industry has to do it these days, right? So there's all this area of the crossover that's yet to be invented, frankly. But actually, when you start piecing it together, and maybe this is the design thinking that we do, it doesn't feel daunting. It's kind of all been done before. It's just piecing it together differently and putting it back together in a slightly different way or whatever, So it's entirely doable. I've no fear in that at all. And we know the concept of what we're going to try to do. And we understand the engineering needs re-engineering to make it happen. And hey, we'll have another patentable piece of our unique licensable product, at the end of it, I guess.
You're reinventing the supply chain for cotton manufacturing and rethinking it as well,
Right.
because there's pieces of it that aren't, if you assume you no longer need to transport the cotton that's been picked into bales and pack it and ship it. And, all these things we just take for granted have to happen in open field ag, you're really having to go back to the drawing board saying, do we really, what can we remove from this process to shorten that distance travel, as you will?
That's
people talking.
And with every one of those processes, especially the more aggressive ones of ginning, which is, it's opening the cotton and getting all the detritus out of that. You're pulling on and you're cutting the fibers and you're spoiling the quality in the end, right? So the more of that we can cut out, the less damage we do to the fiber and the more, we can maintain the quality of what we grow. So there's lots of good reasons to do it. Energy use, shortening miles traveled, improving the quality and making a unique setup, really.
And how much of it of the technology are you using is robotics, AI, any of the new technologies now? Are they helping?
So we expect we will, but we're not there yet, frankly. We're still in the containers and we're going to begin building the pilot in the coming year. And there are still a number of unknowns and some known unknowns as well, right? Oh, that old chestnut. So we've got to be careful. So we're not going to go diving in with a full overblown design of something that we've seen work elsewhere that might not be quite right for us. We're going to evolve, right?
Sure.
So we're going to build the basics with some automation and some manual systems still in there, but some automation. Yes, we're under LEDs. We're probably not going to stack to begin with as well until we're sure that we're getting the right results and we understand more about the plant height and things like that.
Yeah.
We know what we're trying to do with the plant height. We're seeing some good success as well with temperature and light affecting plant height in the way that we want it to do. Those stacks are going to be.
Yeah.
But they will follow, right? That's part of the R&D that we're going to be doing just to perfect that before we then scale up again, right? So yes, the intention is to introduce AI, robotics, all of it, right?
Yeah.
And see what we can do with it. But let's start with the basics, really, to ensure that we're growing effectively and good quality and quickly and all of those other good things that we need to do.
How big's the team now?
Gosh, not that big, really. There are 7 of us at the moment. 8 soon, nearly 8. But yeah, not many.
How has your leadership approach evolved over the past 4 years?
Whoa, has it? I don't believe it has. I'm in a situation that has fully energized me.
Yeah.
And I think people that are working with me are enjoying the energy. I think
Yeah.
I might be
Yeah.
wrong,
Yeah.
interview them, see what they say. But there is a momentum around the excitement at the moment it seems to be, it's just honest, isn't it? Honest energy. And people seem to enjoy that and gravitate to it. But yeah, honesty, I think, is the key thing at the moment.
Yeah.
Not at the moment. Sorry, that sounds terrible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Always honest, right? But,
Always.
Honest about where we're at, what we're doing, what we don't know, right? See
Sure.
people talking about, this T-shirt only used this number of liters of water to produce. It's an idea. It's a concept, right? We don't know yet, right?
Sure.
But we do know
Yeah.
that growing in a vertical farming setting is going to use a heck of a lot less water than is being used in field, a massive amount less water than being used in field. That's all we really know.
Yeah.
So we're quite happy to tell people we will use a lot less water. I can't tell you how much yet because we've not got the data. We've not done it. But as soon as we do, we'll let everybody know,
And how are you addressing the challenges that have, plagued some of the vertical farms in the past, just concerns about energy and access to energy?
Yeah. So the pilot facility that's in design at the moment does include an off-grid energy package.
Okay.
But the questions around it still remain about the geography of where we're actually going to build. So we've got 3 locations that are under consideration and negotiation at the minute.
Yeah.
And dependent on those locations will determine the final ability for us to provide that full off-grid package. It might be that we can't entirely go off-grid, or it might be in one of the sites we believe that the wind availability will be really significant and help, so we've got to understand the different types of energy production that are around us that we can introduce to this, and battery storage, of course, and all the rest of it. We know what kind of energy we need, obviously, and it's an expensive piece to put in there, but you've got to do it, I think. And that's part of what we're trying to do, is improve the R&D around that as well, so that we can, and there are companies that are specializing, obviously, in those solutions. We have a lot of experience of high voltage with some of the electric vehicle companies that we work with in the architectural business. So we're exposed to a lot of high voltage kind of solutions, which is kind of fortunate, right?
Yeah, that's helpful.
And that's helping us with the design of what we need to produce. So we're going to be as off-grid as we can, is the answer to that. And we hope that it will be 100% off-grid with a bit of luck.
Great story to tell. What's a tough question you've had to ask yourself recently?
A tough question I've had to ask myself recently about this project or in life. I don't know. A tough question. Do you know what? Often the answer might be, oh, can I do this? I'm not asking that question yet. I know I can. It's absolutely pulling me along. It's a funny thing about this project. I feel it's fallen onto my lap and I'm responsible to deliver it somehow. It's kind of a weird thing. And that gives me a momentum of absolute confidence that we're doing it and it's happening and it's going in the right direction. So a question I might ask myself is, what am I doing about keeping my ego in check? Because I didn't used to have one and I feel like I might be developing one a little bit. So I need to be careful with that. So yeah, that's maybe food for thought.
I think a healthy ego is always helpful to an extent, sometimes to get the work done.
Right.
And then to your point, having a balance is always just as important.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe.
Yeah.
I have, people that will keep my feet firmly on the ground if they should start lifting off it. I'm sure of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, that feeling that since you've been placed in this moment in time, and that, because of your experience and because of all the pieces coming, this perfect storm of events that have happened, somehow you find yourself as the one that's leading this, and you look around to see if anyone has picked up the mantle and no one has. And you're like, well, I guess this specific project has been assigned to me.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's not just me. Let's not say that I'm the guy that's delivering it all. I have a partner in this as well, Andres, that's doing his piece in it as well. But it's a combined kind of feeling. He has the same sensation, I believe, that we've somehow been given this mantle or this torch to carry, and we've got to go and do something with it. It is really weird. But that's, again, it's energizing, really.
It must feel good to take part in almost like a movement where you're shaking up an industry.
Right.
And even within vertical farming, the shaking up the centuries old practice of like creating garments from cotton, right? Like, that's something that's probably ripe for disruption.
Yeah. in the same way that farming is generally, right? Yeah. And our vertical farming is
sure.
doing all those great things to change. And there's always resistance to change. And we're kind of mindful of the fact that the cotton industry is a very large and well-established black hole of who's who. And, I'm sure there'll be people that support us, but there'll be people that want to stop us at the same time. I'm
Sure.
quite sure of that. We'll start making our mark, but we just got to get ahead of that as much as we can, really.
Well, it sounds like you came on my radar probably because of the recent wave of PR
Yeah.
that you've done. And I think that's starting, you could probably speak to this more, but it's starting to generate some results. And I imagine you're having more exposure than you had this time last year.
Well, it's my first podcast, Harry, but yeah, there's been a few interviews, I've got to say. And yeah, there's a lot of interest around what we're trying to do. And for the most part, all of it at the moment, it's been very supportive and, everybody's saying way to go and keep it up kind of thing. So yeah, we're quite happy. But yeah, the PR campaign we did was pretty damn good, actually.
Yeah.
The results were much better than I believed they were going to be. So yeah.
Yeah. Got on our radar for sure. So let's say we're having this conversation a year from now. What would need to have happened in the past 12 months for you to be happy with your progress?
A year from now, we need to be not knee deep in mud. No, we're beyond that stage. We need to be fitting out the new build. So it'll be a new construction that we're putting up. But we need to be well underway with fitting that out with the farming equipment, beginning the construction of the spinning mill. That needs to be starting. So that certainly needs to be where we need to be. And also into the breeding program that we're starting as well, the gene editing that we're going to be looking at for the improvements and what have you that we need to do with creating our own variety of cotton, I guess, is what we're aiming at. No, I guess we are.
And how are the certifications in the UK? Because I know if I think about it from the States perspective, there's a big push for organic cotton. And obviously there's trade organizations that determine how and when you can use that label. And I'm curious if there's anything similar or what uphill battles you're fighting for labeling.
I don't know yet, right? And that's the truth. Awful lot of certifications, organizations, all nobly trying to keep, the sustainability flag flying and do the best. And it's true, they're doing the best within the constraints of what the industry will allow them to do. And then there are other organizations that maybe are trying to capitalize on, bring it through me, filter all the attention through me and I'll skim some money out of the deal kind of thing. So there's all manner of everything that's going on around cotton. Everyone's trying everything. I have a particular aversion to organic that I maybe shouldn't talk about and just generally infield cotton, So the industry is full of, some disingenuous, some well-meaning organizations and others that are out there.
As most industries
and
are.
What they are, right? And one of the reasons, and this is all part of the thinking process early on, it was, well, how are we going to get around these things? We need to spit our own cotton. So there was, right? So, the first port of call for being controlled by demand, so to speak, in traditional farming terms for cotton, is when you bale the cotton and the guy from the local authority comes along and he tears a sample off and he takes you to the lab and he'll tell you how good it is, how bad it is, and how much money you're going to get for it.
Wow.
After all your effort, that's the moment that you know what the quality and value of your cotton is going to be and whether you're going to eat this year or not in some cases, right? Maybe I'm being extreme, but in some cases for sure. So what we realized, I think, Harry, early on was, well, that guy right there, it could be friend or foe. And if he's foe, right? If he's, I don't want to suggest that this goes on in any industry, but if he's in some way controlled by somebody, right? He's going to say, oh, your quality's crap and, it's worth nothing and nobody should use it, even if it's bang on, right? So we said, how do we avoid that? Let's just spin the cotton and take it to another level and keep going until really the only accreditation we need is to make sure that the manufactured standard of the garment is suitable for sale, right? So we have standards we've got to achieve there, but we're kind of going to be setting our own standard of cotton quality in amongst it, right? And good on us, I think, for trying to do it that way. But, there's the economic reasons, there's the supply chain reasons. There are many reasons for bringing this thing together, but one of them was to avoid that being blocked by an industry that might not take kindly to us when we come along with an alternative to what they're currently doing, right?
Yeah, in true disruptive fashion.
I suppose, right?
Well, I can understand that to your point. There's a lot of people who, are those gatekeepers and, have a vested interest in keeping things status quo, but it's always been like that way for centuries, probably longer. But I think what's important, and as you were speaking to that, I can almost see an opportunity for a model that's a new model for farmers. It's a new model for farmers that maybe there is a way
Yeah.
to create a new pathway to profitability that's not dependent on a rubber stamp from someone that might have, a vested interest in not stamping. So it's interesting. And I don't know if you've thought that far ahead, but like,
Quite.
this idea of true, whatever the word is, sovereignty, from a farmer's perspective about, what to do with the crop in a way that you have more control over and you're not beholden, to just old ways of doing things. I think it's really exciting.
I wonder, yeah. And I guess that to some extent is what the old cooperatives did many, many years
Yeah.
ago, where farmers came together to say, no, screw you. We'll sell our milk, actually. And they come together and find a way to do it. So, it's not unique that we're trying to find a way to do it for ourselves as well, I suppose. And there's inspiration in history, isn't there, for all these things like that.
Exciting times ahead. I really am grateful for you making the time to share, especially having this insights into an industry that's as old as, it's probably any of the old trades that you can think of, cotton goes
Absolutely,
back
yeah, it is.
I'm sure, to Silk Road days as well. So it's been exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's coming home, Harry. That's what we're doing. We're bringing it back to England. Although we've never grown cotton in England, but the cotton industry was enormous, obviously, in the north of England, a couple of hundred years ago or more. So,
and it's exciting, I'm sure, to be able to say that you actually grew the cotton in England and this is a UK product, and to really have some pride in having something that's sourced locally, grown locally, manufactured locally. And, there's definitely, I know we see that pride here sometimes in the States with Made in USA, and I'm sure it's the same thing there, and it's nice to have that. Yeah.
It is really, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of made in England, but actually grown in England when it comes to cotton. It is a unique thing. And I guess that's why we've really focused on doing it here first. We don't want to be restricted to the UK borders, though, once we get going. We want to build these things wherever they need to be built and scale, and see what we can do about, helping the climate, turn it around somewhat, be part of that movement to try and make a difference there.
What has been your engagement or interaction with folks in the vertical farming space? I know it's still early days. Obviously, we're happy to share your story on this show, but have you the team made your way to any of the indoor farming conferences? Have you started?
Yeah, I went to one last year and I met some real interesting folks and, supportive and what have you. I think there's the supply chain within vertical farming that's well represented there as well, and lighting suppliers, electric connection suppliers, and you name it, all manner of people in there. And within it as well, those that have built the farms already and those that are planning them too. So it's an interesting bunch and varied, personnel that seems to exist in the industry, as with any really. But yeah, I hope to get to know them better in the coming months and years as we really get stuck into
a lot
this.
Of big events. We're heading over to Indoor AgCon, which is in Las Vegas. That's usually the big one. That's been around 12 years as well. And then that's in March, first week of March in Las Vegas as well. Yeah. So.
All right. Any excuse to go to Vegas.
Yeah, sure. If you're there,
I'll be there.
So Simon, I like to leave some time towards the end of these conversations in the spirit of this open forum collaboration, as we sort of alluded to early on, because to some extent it does work. And there are people within this space that do talk to each other, but there is that sort of, keep it close to the vest. Don't release, the secret sauce, if you will. And I'm just trying to, let us remind everyone that's listening, a lot of your colleagues listen to this show as well. So is there any thoughts you have for the controlled environment space, indoor farming space? You're relatively new to the space, and you're starting to meet some of the folks that are involved. But, from what you've seen and what's been your experience so far, is there anything that you think would be more helpful for some of this collaborative work we're trying to do here?
It's really difficult, isn't it? Because obviously, even we're trying to evolve our own IP, right? We have a solution that's unique and we need investors to help us deliver it. And investors aren't going to be overly pleased if you start sharing all your secret sauce all over the internet, right? And it's kind of, wouldn't it be nice if it could be different? And I guess there are experiences that can be shared that aren't IP rich in any way and can be shared openly of, you don't want to do that, mate. It doesn't work kind of thing, and why it doesn't work would be kind of helpful. I guess it's that really. It's about, having open forums to be able to share the do's and don'ts of the things that are not protected, right? But there are lots of mistakes that can be made that don't need to be made. And if only somebody would say, don't try that, try this instead, that'd be cool. If there could be more of that, would be really good.
I think what you find and what I've seen is inevitably when you go to the conferences, is people like to get value from the content, which is always good.
Mm.
It's always the hallway conversations or the pints at the pub after the
Always.
show. And
Yeah,
like, it's just
always.
really when everyone's got their guard down,
Yeah.
that's over the years from the podcasting world. And now in the indoor farming space, I see that, some of the best conversations I've had have been after hours, if you will.
They always are.
Yeah.
My whole career was built on standing in bars and smoking cigarettes. Not that I smoke cigarettes anymore, but being with the
Yeah.
right person at the right time to
That's
have
right.
that relaxed
Yeah.
conversation was
Yeah.
really beneficial,
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's
I hope that leads to more relaxed conversations, and it's an invite to anyone that's watching or listening. So I
absolutely,
really
yeah, I'd love that.
appreciate being able to connect with your team to get this organized. And I was excited just to learn more about what's happening in your world. And it's exciting to see new innovations and new crops in the indoor farming space. And it sounds like all roads have led to you doing this and for you, helping to lead the charge on this. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with my audience.
Thank you, Harry. It's been lovely. Thanks for a nice conversation. And happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll send folks,
All right.
we'll get the links in the show notes that you sent over, good-drop.com. Anywhere else you want to have folks reach out to connect with you?
LinkedIn's always good.
Okay, we'll make sure.
Find me on there.
Yeah, we'll have your profile there as well. Thanks for your
That'll
time.
be great.
Simon.
All right, take care.